Top of the fourth here in Worcester. Brockton on top 1-0. JP Knight, Mark Goulart, Mike Sabatine due up for Brockton. Joined on the broadcast right now by Boston Bruins play-by-play announcer for NESN, Jack Edwards. Jack, absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, and this is quality baseball. I mean, beautiful summer night and phenomenal venue. Really high-quality ball.
Now, you've been doing a lot of promotional stuff so far with us tonight on our promotional staff. Is that one sent out to center? Johnson going back, and it's over his head. One hops the wall, and JP Knight is into second with a stand-up double. You've been doing a little bit of play-by-play, even though this is your off-season. You had the eyeball race with Jake the Lion taking the win. You had the pie-eating contest. You've stepped in seamlessly, Jack. It's like there's been no off-season for you.
Well, you know, as a broadcaster, Anthony, whatever the job requires, you do your best, right?
Absolutely.
I did kickboxing before MMA actually was organized, when guys would make their records up the afternoon of the World Championship fight that night. And so it was, you know, kind of making it up on the fly, but if you can capture one moment that brings fans the flavor of the game, you've done your job.
And I overheard you mentioning that you did sumo wrestling at
Yeah.
one point as well, too. What was that like? That must have been an experience.
You know, at first I thought it was going to be a joke, but those guys live such a dedicated lifestyle. They're like monks during the season. As there's a meeting on the mound, the entire infield's in there. By the way, you're not missing anything. These guys live together. They dedicate their entire existence to winning at sumo, and there are written records that go back more than 1,000 years in Japan of sumo wrestling. So it was great to get immersed in that culture.
Mark Goulart, the hitter now, with JP Knight at second. He'd have led off with a double, Now, Jack, obviously you're a hockey guy, Boston Bruins play-by-play announcer. You've done a little bit of baseball, though, with ESPN, Little League baseball at the time.
Yeah.
What's your relationship like with baseball? Obviously, you're here tonight, and you like the game, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, every American kid grows up wanting to be a professional baseball player, doesn't he? And when I first saw my first quality curveball, I knew I knew that wasn't going to be a dream that would come true.
Now, a lot of people talk about baseball and hockey as kind of two polar opposites. Hockey, you have the fast pace. How do you keep up with it? Whereas baseball, you got times like that where the pitcher waits and then the batter steps out or the pitcher steps off the rubber. From your experience doing both, what have you found being the similarities in terms of the difficulty of broadcasting either sport?
Well, obviously in baseball you have a lot more room to explain biographies and situations and anecdotes than you do when the puck is in play in hockey. But the sports have a lot more in common than one would think. And one advantage is working with Andy Brickley, who is a tremendous all-around athlete. He played Division I hockey, obviously, at the University of New Hampshire, but more than a few people know that he was an outstanding baseball player there, too.
As Goulart sends that one the other way, Thrasher coming in to make the catch for the first out. JP Knight stays at second. What's that like working with Brick, big energy guy?
You know, I've worked with over 100 color commentators in the course of my career, and I've never worked with someone who is so facile with the language and is able to assimilate what has just happened and can explain it thoroughly in 12 seconds on the first take, and everybody understands it, and you don't feel dumb before you feel smart. And he's just a remarkable talent and a wonderful guy, and seriously, one of the most brilliant people I've ever known.
And you mentioned language. One thing that always puts me in awe, specifically with hockey broadcasters, and I think the epitome of this is Doc Emmerich, is the verbs and the terminology that he uses. You have a couple of your own. Tumbling muffin, rock'em sock'em robots. One of my personal favorites is when you're doing the play-by-play of the cameraman slipping on the ice, then tumbling over the boards. Does that all come naturally to you, or is that something that you kind of practice and think of beforehand?
It's, it's like baseball. You put situations in your head and you just build a bank. And when it happens in front of your eyes, you spring it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you have to make it up spontaneously. But I prepare as well as I can for every game, as every broadcaster does. And once the puck drops, it's just on autopilot for me. I just react.
A one-out walk here for Mike Sabatine, so runners on first and second with one out for Brockton. What do you think of the Bravehearts so far? They're having an okay season, 22-20. You come in tonight and you're seeing a pretty good game so far, 1-0. Sean Babineau's been pretty good.
Yeah, I really like the poise of this lefty. He has command. He knows where and what pace he wants on his pitches. And it seems that this is one of the games that he doesn't have his very best stuff, but he's still finding a way to get guys out, and that's the mark of a quality pitcher.
When you were a player, what was your position?
I was a catcher, all 146 pounds of me. And that was back in the day when you could have collisions by blocking the plate, and stupidly I did, which probably is an excuse for me now. because I always absorbed the worst end of the collision, but it was all fun.
And we were talking about collisions in between that half inning. You were doing the eyeball race, and Jake the Lion ended up winning. And we had a couple other mascots out there as well, and they tag-teamed the eyeball, and you were right on top of that collision. You compared it to the Torrey Krug hit in the final against St. Louis. Where does that one rank up on the collisions you've seen?
A little short of Krug's hit, but it'll be one that sticks in my memory bank. You may hear a reference to it during the coming season.
And we got to talk about the Bruins at least a little bit, as that's a good stop from Livingston moving to his left. Went all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. They made some additions over the course of the year, Marcus Johansson being a big one. They fell a little bit short to St. Louis in Game 7. No home team won in the Stanley Cup Final, which is shocking. You would think the Bruins would win one of at least 4 if it's going to go to 7 games. Why did they come up short in your eyes?
St. Louis found a way to win, and St. Louis mastered the art of playing with the lead. That 2-0 goal in Game 7 decided the Stanley Cup. And that's just a situation that a team can get in, speaking from the Bruins' perspective, when you let it go to 7 games. And St. Louis was the better team, and tip your cap to them. And it was a phenomenal run by the Bruins, and I really enjoyed the extraordinary growth of players like Brandon Carlo, Charlie McAvoy, Charlie Coyle, even Matt Grzelcyk, who missed most of the Stanley Cup Final because of his concussion.
A lot of people questioning the core of this Bruins team now, another year older for guys like Patrice Bergeron, Zdeno Chara coming back on another short-term deal, Brad Marchand, Tuukka Rask. Was this their best shot in the next 2 to 3 years?
I didn't see the Bruins making the Stanley Cup Final a year ago, so I'm not one to be accurate with predictions, but I think Don Sweeney has thought it out as thoroughly as anybody can think it out, and I'm sure they've got a plan, and I think they'll contend. I think they'll be a playoff team, and if they can stay healthy, sky's the limit.
It's a 1-2 count on Spencer Smith, joined with Jack Edwards here, the Bruins play-by-play announcer for NESN. We've got a 1-2 count here, Jack. Why don't you take this one away? Babineau on the mound, Spencer Smith down 1-2.
All right. Babineau wants something different. Looks the runner back. And we'll do it again at 1-2. Babineau has some Tom Glavine in it, doesn't he?
A little bit.
I'm dating myself, of course, but you don't have to throw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball to be an excellent pitcher. Here's the 1-2. Almost got him to chase.
Natural. No off season for you, Jack.
Yeah, I have lost track of all the personnel in Major League Baseball because I dedicate so much of my intellectual effort to hockey. I need about 3 weeks off after every hockey season, and then I start to do research again. And that was a marvelous pitch. And another example of not having to blow it by him.
7 strikeouts for Sean Babineau. Jack, absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us on the broadcast.
Anthony, thanks for having me.
1-0 Brockton after 3.5.